What's up, guys? I wanted to do this video because somebody had posted a question earlier about whether or not people use lighting kits or ring lights for their photography. And being a photographer, I have a lot of knowledge in this area, but I've answered this, or at least something along these lines, in other groups in the past, and I remember my response being very long when it comes to photography questions or lighting questions. Since I do love this subject, my answers for those, my comments for those, do tend to be really long. I usually try to at least go into detail so that I don't just say, oh, I like it because of this, or it's because of it's in auto mode, and not explain why or something like that. So in this case, I thought it was just better to and easier to do the video so I can explain at least myself better, hopefully get my point a little bit better across through the camera than I think it would if I typed out 4 paragraphs in the comments. Specifically, they spoke about ring lights, and I'm on the fence with ring lights. There's photographers that I respect and follow in the industry, and they use ring lights for their portrait work, and when they do, they do a good job at it. But ring lights have a specific look, and I feel like it's only appropriate for small instances and fashion portraiture mostly. But when it comes to at least clothing photography, this type of photography, and even on pretty much most of the portrait work that I do, ring light, or at least the light coming from a ring that's right around the lens, I don't think is as appealing. And that is just me, though, because of course everything is preference. But specifically, I mean, all a ring light really is a lot of light being thrown at a subject, but from around the lens. When it comes to lighting, or when it comes to photography, not only is it important that we all know that basically to get the more light we can throw at a camera, the better, and also the direction of the light, it makes a huge difference, and whether or not you're looking for harsh or soft shadows. Ring lights tend to take away shadows, and especially in this type of photography, product photography, clothing, shadows are our friend. Shadows help convey a 3D object across using a 2D medium. Photographs are 2D, and we're trying to make something look pleasing that's 3D come across on something that's flat. So shadows help create that dimension. If you take away the shadow, it essentially goes flat, and that is not appealing. And specifically, of course, to try to sell the clothing, we want the clothing to be as appealing as possible. For live sales, ring lights, I think, are not that we don't use ring lights for our live sales, but I can see why people use them for live sales. But for the photography, I don't necessarily think that it's a good idea. Now, I said just a moment ago, soft or hard light. The key to soft and hard light is the size of the light source in relationship to the subject. If you have a small light source with a subject that's not far away, you're going to get a harsh light. And with this type of photography, taking pictures of the clothing, harsh light isn't our friend. So we want a softer light, regardless if you're talking about a constant light source or a flash. Ring lights, on the other hand, since they're directly in front of the lens, one thing you have to remember about them is you can't diffuse them. You can't put something in front of the light to make the light a bit softer because it's hitting the subject a little bit too hard or something like that, because obviously if you put something in front of the light to diffuse it, you're also covering the lens, and obviously that doesn't work. Whereas other lighting kits, you can diffuse the light. The sides of the light source, if there's any diffusion to the relationship to the subject. So you'll see a lot of photographers will use, or won't use, but you've probably seen on a lot of cameras, the small on-camera flash. And that essentially in the photography world, with professionals at least, is a no-no to use. If we're in a tight jam, there's things that we can do where I've maybe my off-camera flash wasn't firing, so I've popped up the on-camera flash, I've stuck a card in front of it, like a white card or a cap to something, which either diffused the light or sent the light to the ceiling and then down at the subject. But a small light source coming from directly above the lens, it's going to flatten out the subject and make it unflattering. So when it comes to lighting kits, you have something like this, which is a constant light. This is literally, the brand is Photo Studio, which is another way of saying extremely generic brand. I got this years ago on Amazon. It holds 4 light bulbs and it's a constant light source. Other types of lighting for photography are either strobes or flashes like this, or flashes I'm sure that you've all seen that are smaller than this guy. They get mounted to the top of cameras and kind of aim. They get mounted to the top of the camera and kind of aim outwards. It's essentially the idea is the same. It's light you're throwing at the subject. The reason why I'm going into all this is because, back to what I said before, soft or harsh shadows. To achieve soft shadows, the key to that is the relationship of the light source to the subject, specifically the size. So photographers will take even cheap lighting units like this and put them into different lighting modifiers to essentially create a specific shape and softness with the light. It's the lighting modifiers that essentially make a difference in how you aim them. So say, take this for example. This unit is, like I said, cheap unit from Amazon, but it's the light bulbs in here that make a difference. Of course, I can decide how bright I want these bulbs. This thing, it's just essentially 4 sockets. But if I put cheap bulbs in here, then I'm gonna get that essentially quality of light. Of course, since it's my choice of what lights I put in here and what lights I have in the room that I'm taking the outdoor photography, will help keep consistent color balance in my photos. So the lights that are in here are the same lights that are in the other unit, and it's the same lights that I have in the ceiling, so the color temperature is all the same. So when the camera tries to guess the color temperature, it's not at least having to worry about multiple color lights coming from different directions. If I take this light source as is and I aim it at a subject, then the size of the light source is really only like 4 inches by 4 inches. But if I take this light source and I put it into this, which is also not an expensive, it's a definitely non-brand name pop-up softbox that I got along the time that I got this guy. This is when I was learning constant lighting versus flash photography, so I didn't want to put a lot of money into it. But when you take this guy and you put the light source in here, now the light is going to come out of the bulbs, hit the back of the umbrella, the softbox, and essentially radiate out, which is going to essentially come out. And now your light source went from this size, 4 inches by 4 inches, to this size. And the larger light source, with a subject that's not far away, is going to create a softer light than a smaller light source, or an even smaller light source. Okay? That is essentially it in a nutshell. So if I take this light, or if I take this light, which is a studio strobe, so of course I can turn up the power quite a bit on this one. I think this is like a 600 watt-second light strobe. If I put this in here and I turn it up, and it's going to throw a lot of light at the back and bounce it out, I may be doing that because that may be the only light source I have, so I need more light than just these 4 60-watt bulbs. But the light that's coming out of it is going to be, it's brighter, it's more powerful, so once it bounces and comes back out, it doesn't lose a lot, and it might come across as harsh. So of course there's things we put in front of it to diffuse it. I've taken a harsh small light source, and I had not had many options to choose from, so I took PVC pipe and a sheet, and I put it and created this guy, which not only do I use for as a white backdrop, but at the same time it is a diffuser. It's going to take a source that's smaller and it's going to make it bigger but softer because it spreads it out. So for example, hopefully this comes across. I don't know if you can, so hopefully it's coming across because I'm looking at my phone, which is connected to the Mevo over there. I've got this guy lit up right here, and watch what happens when I take this big giant piece of PVC with a sheet wrapped around it and I put it in between me and that light source. the shadows get softer, the lighting becomes more pleasant. So my point is, and obviously now, because I don't want the light to be too harsh on me, I'm standing further back from that guy because I don't want the lighting to be that harsh. My point is, I think for this type of photography, the lighting kits are more appropriate because one, you can take them and you can, regardless if it's a constant light source like this, that's not expensive at all, which I do think, side note, you should spend the money on quality bulbs. Or a light source like this that's more expensive. Regardless, if that's the case, you have the ability to use multiple ones. You have the ability to put them into different modifiers to create a softer shadows that are more pleasing than you do with a ring light that's in front of the camera, which you can't diffuse. And I know with the ring lights, they do come with that plastic ring that you can clip on, and I think there's a tungsten colored one, an orange one that you can put on top to try to warm up the light coming from it. And I know, and yes, that piece of plastic that clips on does soften it a bit. But if you take, say, a light like this, and you put the diffuser here, it doesn't have a lot of space to spread and lose power before it hits that diffuser. So by the time it comes out, it's not being diffused as much. It's not spreading as much. It's not having time to spread more across the diffuser. So when you have a ring light and you have a piece of plastic around it, which is the piece of plastic clips right onto it, the light is coming right out and then passing right through it. So softening a bit, but it's not softening it that much. When it comes to lighting kits, they don't have to be expensive. If you're going to purchase a constant light source like this from Amazon, that's great. But if you put cheaper bulbs or dimmer bulbs, if you put 40 watt in versus 30 watt, or if it's a non-brand name versus a nice, that's the kind of stuff that makes a difference. It makes a difference with life of the bulb and then color temperature over time that you're using it. So where if you have this on at the beginning, color temperature is great, and then you use it for a while, or it stays on for hours at a time during a session, the color temperature might shift a bit. But if you take this light source and you put it in a soft box like this, it should be good. It should be, depending on how bright the lights are, enough light to bounce off and come back out. If you take not that guy, and you take a light source like this, which is an octabox, the same thing, where the light's going to either come out or it's going to bounce off and go back. But if it's those bulbs and a light source that's much bigger, yes, it's going to fill it, and the light that's coming out is now going to go from being like 4 inches by 4 inches to being a few feet across, but it's not going to be as much light. So if I was going to take a constant light source and put it into a modifier like this, especially with a diffuser over the front, which I would absolutely have on the front, then I would go to brighter bulbs, or maybe a unit that has more sockets on it. If you take and say you step it up a notch and you take it, and which this is one of my favorite modifiers, and you put it into a modifier like this, which is a soft lighter. Take the light, constant light source or flash, but if we're talking right now about a constant light source, and say specifically that one, you throw it at this wall and bounce it back. Now that light source, which is about 4 inches by 4 inches, has turned into about 4 or 5 feet across through the center. It becomes a large light source, which when it bounces off this and comes back out, not only is a now large light source, the relationship, remember, of the light, of the size of the light to the person, this is going to be a large light source, which means it's going to create a very soft, pleasing light, which is going to create soft shadows. Then of course after that it just depends on where I put this. But if I try to take these four, I think there's 60 watt, 500 looms output light bulbs, and try to bounce it off the back of this 5 foot umbrella, I'm not going to get a lot of power, so I would go to brighter light bulbs. I'd find a cheaper Amazon unit, but one that had 6 sockets. So that kind of thing really comes down to you. But the point is, even if it's something like this, this is my 7-foot octabox. This thing is 7 feet. 7 feet or 6 feet high, and I believe across is about 7 feet. This creates soft light. I put a huge diffuser on the front, huge sheet on the front like this, but it velcros in, and then as you can see, there's also a spot for an inner diffuser. It creates really soft light. But when I want to use that guy, I am not using a constant light source. I'm putting a strobe into it to be able to get enough light to fill that thing and radiate out. So the point is, which I know it's a really long point, but I just think that it's an important one, is when it comes to at least this photography, with the lighting kits, you have the ability with either an umbrella or a softbox to put light into it. You have the ability to say, I'm going to take this, albeit a cheap softbox from Amazon, put really nice light bulbs in it, really nice bright light bulbs in it, and a nice diffuser on the front, and create a really nice soft light that creates soft shadows. Whereas for at least the photography side of this, with the products, with a ring light, you can't put a diffuser on it. So if you get one, then hopefully you get, I saw somebody comment that you can get a dimmable one. But if you get a dimmable one, that still doesn't mean that the light that's coming out of it isn't really being diffused. So that's why I don't necessarily think it's a nice look for the photography. With the cameras in itself, if you're putting something in auto mode, it's essentially looking at the light in the room. And when you take something like, say, this outfit, which is really bright, it's not going to see this and say, oh, they're holding a white shirt. It's going to see this and see all the bright colors and the white and say, wow, the room got really light. Something just added more light in the room. I'm going to darken the photo, and the whites are going to look more gray when you're using, say, something in auto mode. Then if you take this guy and you switch, to say something that's at least darker, or even if you went darker than this to like a black or something like that, it's not going to say, oh, they're holding a black shirt. I'm going to just make sure that black on the shirt comes out a nice rich black. It's going to think that somebody shut off a light in a room, and it's going to try to brighten up the photo to make the resulting photo evenly exposed. And the reason why I brought that up is because when it tries to darken or lighten the photo, the colors are going to change. The white's going to look like a gray. The blacks are going to look muddy. If you have colors in it, the blues or the reds will shift. So and then all this stuff essentially makes a difference. So this is why I didn't want to necessarily put all this in a comment. But basically, to sum it all up, ring lights essentially have their place where I think they're appropriate, but coming directly from the lens, almost like this guy, it almost resembles this light, which is not flattering. You can't diffuse, you can't put something in front of the light, even if it's something really cheap but very effective, like this PVC frame with the sheets. You can't put that in front of the light because obviously you're blocking the camera. And then when you do choose a lighting kit, to just keep in mind that the bulbs that you put in it are more important than at least how much you spend on the fixture itself. And that is at least the area to not cheap out on, and the size of what you're getting. If you get a cheaper lighting kit and not look really on Amazon on how big it is, and it's a smaller kit, then that smaller kit really not going to essentially put out the light that's going to fill the area and produce softer shadows. So the larger of the light source, the softer the shadows you're going to get. Obviously, something like my 7-foot softbox is way overkill for this. I don't use it. I use it for larger groups, not even in my studio when we do gymnastics portraits of the whole team. I use that. But the soft lighter, that huge 5-foot one, I use that for a portrait. One person, I'll use it for a portrait because that big giant light will create a really soft look. For the clothing, I want to get, as you can see, hopefully it comes across in the camera, a shadow. The clothing, every single thing we're taking, we use a leg and we use a form. So of course it's all vertical. So I use what's called a strip box. It's a long light source. It essentially, I use it because because of the shape. I could use one of these octoboxes which sends out a round light source, but since I really don't want any wasted light and I want my light directed in a certain way, and we use the form in the leg, I use a strip box because it sends out a light in that fashion. I use a grid on the top, or because I just want it to be thinner, but that's the point. Is you hopefully not the grid, but the diffuser inside. I have not only the light coming out in a certain way, but it hits this white diffuser and it softens up a bit. They sell cheap strip boxes on Amazon that have that you can stick the cheaper, the less expensive units in, and again it comes back to, if you went that route, it would be great. You just have to make sure that you put quality bulbs in it, bright quality bulbs. If you put bulbs that are pricey but you get 40 watts, it's not going to be enough to fill it. Then it's a moot point. So hopefully it was helpful, and then if it was, let me know in the comments, and and hopefully it wasn't too long, and thanks for sitting through it all.